the president making his mandate a few days ago is the most patriotic thing that he could do. I'm here to tell you no. No, it is not, and I'm going to explain to you why on the other side of the intro.
Are calling your vaccine requirements an overreach. You are threatening to challenge it in court.
Have at it.
Meow, Huples cat. The latest excitement for people on the right is the fact that they're now looking at the vaccines and masking in terms of patriotism. And some on the left are as well. And it really isn't a patriotic act to take a vaccine or not take a vaccine. And it also, again, puts these people into a little box that says the only thing in the world is America, and there isn't a globe, and there isn't things happening in other countries, because all I care about is what I see in my own country.
I am so disappointed that particularly some Republican governors have been so cavalier with the health of these kids, so cavalier with the health of their communities. We're playing for real here. This isn't a game. And I don't know of any scientist out there in this field that doesn't think it makes considerable sense to do the 6 things I've suggested.
Gus Anthony is right. This is not the most patriotic thing somebody can do. The most patriotic thing you can do is to die for your country. And right now a lot of people are dying for their country because of COVID. It's not seen in terms of a war, and yet it is. And I don't know if Biden's rhetoric is actually going to make the people who are anti-vaxxer get vaccinated, but I do know it is playing very strongly with the 60 to 70% of Americans who are vaccinated. Now, I found all the way through the last few months, a lot of people on the right don't seem to comprehend what a mandate is. An actual mandate, not as Biden. What a mandate is something that you have no choice in. And there is choice here, so it's not exactly a mandate in the traditional sense. But what are Biden's 6 points? He wants to vaccinate the unvaccinated, further protect the vaccinated, keep schools safely open, increase testing and require masking, protect our economic recovery, and improve care for those with COVID-19. Now, out of all of these things, most people will not have a problem with all of them, except for the vaccinate the unvaccinated, and that's an issue. There is that sense there from a tiny minority of people that COVID isn't real, that it's not a threat to them or their family, so they're not getting an experimental vaccine put into them, despite the fact over 5 billion doses have been given, and it's effective and safe.
Now more than ever, it's important for Americans to take care of their health. When it comes to protecting yourself against the COVID-19 virus, the FDA-approved vaccine might not be the right choice for patients who are allergic to reality. That's why there's ivermectin, the COVID-19 treatment option for real patriots. With ivermectin, you can say nay to the FDA and take matters into your own hooves. Don't take ivermectin if you plan on driving, operating heavy machinery, or if you're wearing your good pants. Side effects of ivermectin can include uncontrollable vomiting and diarrhea, the inability to pronounce Kamala Harris's name, or a sudden urge to speak to the manager. Some patients taking ivermectin have reported hallucinations of lizard people in the halls of Congress, and in rare cases, finding Joe Rogan's podcast helpful and/or informative. Call your doctor if you begin to experience delusions of grandeur about the supremacy of your race. Homicidal thoughts or actions toward your elected representatives can occur without warning. Join the herd. Talk to your large animal veterinarian about ivermectin today. Or don't, because you're not a f***ing sheep.
One of the lessons I hope our students can unlearn is that politics doesn't have to be this way. Politics doesn't have to be this way. They're growing up in an environment where they see it's like a war, like a bitter feud.
And he's right. Large amounts of people around the world are looking at the United States and going, oh my God, like what's going on with you guys? Like it's an infectious disease, right? So any prepper, anybody who's not insane or suicidal or homicidal, in an infectious disease would want to wear a mask, would want to keep distancing, and would want to take a safe vaccine as soon as a safe vaccine is freely available. And yet, there's about 10 to 15% of the population in most countries that are completely anti-vaccine. And a lot of it has been traced to misinformation, which I was actually going to put into this video, but I'm not.
If Democrat says right, everybody says left. If Democrat says left, they say right. I mean, it's not how we are. It's not who we are as a nation. And it's not how we beat every other crisis in our history.
Well, you could argue that, but I would argue quite strongly that this speech and other speeches are very politicized. He's very much drawing a line in the sand. Look at what these bad Republican governors did. They ignored the science. Look at what these good Democrat governors did. They followed the science. Look at the death tolls in each of the states and make a political judgment based on blue and red. Now, I've long held the view that blue and red's a distraction, but that's another issue. But what actually does this mean? Well, what it means is people do videos and they are claiming that they are patriots for refusing to be vaccinated. They're claiming, and this is a really bizarre thing, that the vaccines, by having to take a vaccine, their rights are being trampled on, and their rights are more important to them than the health and welfare of their families and their communities. Now that's really hard to argue that's a patriotic act. Patriots die and suffer for the good of their nation, for the people in their nation. They don't take very selfish lines. I mean, it was mandated in World War II that you had to go and fight Germany and Japan and Italy. And people died and got injured from there and had their lives severely disrupted and didn't want to go. And generally speaking, they had to, because their country was at war. And the whole thing with COVID is it's a war with nature. A specific virus, the SARS-CoV-2 virus, and we're at war with it. We don't want to lose a large section of our population. And yet we've lost a large section of our population. But in reality, what does it mean for these people who are patriots, who believe in free speech and all the rest of it? Well, on Anthony's channel, I actually did my opinion, and I will put that up now. You can watch Anthony's video. He explains why it's patriotic to refuse a vaccine in an airborne pandemic. It's quite interesting. But I haven't clipped it, I haven't taken it out of context. I just want to talk about the thread, because the thread is very interesting. What I've said here is my opinion, that you can't claim refusing a vaccine knowing that it will harm other Americans and maybe yourself and your own family is a patriotic act, defending your freedom to refuse to be vaccinated. Nobody's vaccinating anyone. Well, I think the army is. But nobody's being forced to take the vaccine. You have a choice. You can be tested frequently for COVID-19 and then put into quarantine if you have it. So you don't actually have to take the vaccine. So yet again, these people, and it's a tiny minority, are screaming and shouting on the streets that they're being forced to take a vaccine because they're choosing not to be vaccinated, because they want to go to ball games and bars indoors unvaccinated without being tested. Now that's a really interesting thing, isn't it? How is that patriotic? I don't know. To me, my opinion is it is not. And I thought my comment was fairly straightforward. And I didn't go back and look because I knew the usual people would immediately go personal and attack. Oh, and they did. So I've been nursing since 1984 and I retired this year. I have a Master's of Science in Nursing. I've taught and teach classroom nursing in the 4th year baccalaureate program. I've run a teaching hospital until recently when I retired. And I've taught critical care in the classroom and in clinical. And I know a lot about nursing. And yet, this guy tells me that I don't know what I speak. I do know what I speak. I think taking a risk, if you see it at that, of a vaccine side effect in an airborne pandemic to protect others in your nation, I see that as patriotic. Though I think the language is a bit weird, and I don't know why it's patriotism or why it's political. It's just common sense. I mean, why would you go out and about in public with no vaccine, no mask, and no distancing? Like, I don't know, it doesn't make much sense to me, but what do I know? So then he immediately pivots to socialism. I'm a democratic socialist, and that's well known, and these people are not. I don't quite know what they are, but they're certainly not Democrats. But the thing is, they're talking about the takeover of our freedoms. You have the freedom not to be vaccinated. If you choose not to be vaccinated, we have the right to have you tested frequently to make sure you're not infecting us, right? That's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about rounding everybody up and injecting dangerous vaccines into people. We're talking about doing everything we can to encourage people to get vaccinated because it's the right way to deal with the pandemic, this one specifically. And if you don't choose to be vaccinated, that's your right. But we have a right. We have a right. The nation has a right to be excluding you from public events unless you choose to wear a mask. And if you choose not to wear a mask, don't go. And if you choose not to be vaccinated, don't go. And if you choose not to be vaccinated but are tested and are clear, please come. The bottom line here is that they are seeing their right to do whatever they want in an airborne pandemic as more important than the nation's right to have good health and good healthcare facilities. And that's pretty obvious. And they know this deep down, which is why I suspect they're getting angry. So I'm going to read a little bit of the rest of it. It is patent nonsense and it's absolutely childish dribble, but I will highlight the dribbly bits. When this so-called vaccine, which does not meet the definition of, does not stop one from getting a virus or from transmitting a virus, what good is it? Well, it does all of those things and it is a vaccine and you don't know what you're talking about. Also, the variant it was designed for is no longer around. Actually, no. It wasn't designed for a variant. It was designed for the alpha variant, which was actually the first one. And it's very effective against beta and delta. And we're not quite sure about mu. We'll find out. So it's less than useless because it's dangerous because the side effects jab leaves those who've got the jab with. Alright, whatever. As I keep saying, I remember he says I know nothing. I have seen 0 admitted side effect patients in my hospital. 0. I have seen hundreds of COVID patients. So leaving all that aside, like, yeah, I'm sure some people are getting side effects and some people are actually possibly dying from it. And there is a suggestion that if you're 12 to 15-year-old and a boy, perhaps you may not get vaccinated because perhaps it's got more cardiac issues than COVID has. We don't know. We're still looking at it. It's a new disease. And this goes with the people that want to wait 5 to 10 years before they vaccinate the population. By then, everybody's dead who's going to die from it, so why vaccinate? And the other thing with this is like having a tin of food. Nuclear wars happens, you've got 1 tin of Spam left, and it expires in a month. And you're starving. And you say, what good is this tin of Spam? It expires in a month. I'm not eating it. That's my right to die of starvation. And the starvation is catching to others. It doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. They're really pretzeling themselves here to try and prove their point, which is not correct and not based on reality. And they are really stretching for this. Well, I don't know where he lives, but in Canada, pretty much everybody's wearing masks, pretty much everybody's keeping distance, and pretty much everybody's washing their hands. And we have over 80% of our population who are adults vaccinated. So I don't quite know what he's talking about here. What I see is a lot of unvaccinated people showing up on a regular basis, the same 200 or 300 people who are well funded, and that's what you need to look at. Who's paying for the unvaccinated propaganda? And they show up and they get in your face and start shouting at you with no mask on. That's really stupid behavior.
This is the worst crisis we have faced in our lifetimes, and we have probably the worst government right now in terms of dealing with it and listening to the doctors and the professionals who know how to protect the health of citizens. That our government, who we've elected to serve us, to protect us, is doing nothing as our cases surge to the highest levels ever, our hospitals fill up, our healthcare workers burn out. That's why we're here. And we're hoping that this will send a message to this government that this is not on, right? Do your job. I don't know where this government is at, like where its thinking is at. And listen to the experts. Your doctors have been warning that this was coming for weeks. Who are you listening to? Those idiots across the road? Those anti-vaxxers? Is that who is dictating what you do?
And I'm fighting for mankind. I'm fighting for mankind. Yeah, you get your death jabs, you get your booster shots. You're sheep. You're sheep.
The only people that's wrecking society are the unvaccinated. The only people that are causing problems right now in hospitals mostly are the unvaccinated. And whilst there is some point and there is an opinion to be had and a discussion to be had about the efficiency of vaccinating compared to natural immunity, the suggestion here that we all catch this disease because natural immunity is better than being vaccinated is absolutely homicidal and suicidal. If you can, get vaccinated. If you've had COVID-19, I wouldn't actually recommend being vaccinated, but I didn't. And yet they are finding some elements of truth and then making it into a worldview. Of course, the idea that you spent the last 2 decades wandering around not being flu vaccinated, which I have not been, but ignoring the fact that you may have flu and going out in public with flu, again, shows me very much where these people's brains are. His right to go to Costco with flu symptoms compared to the people in Costco and the people who work there's rights not to be infected by flu. It's kind of that simple. He's made his own argument here, and he talks about the Scotsman fallacy and all the rest of it. I ain't going into that. This isn't about fallacies, this isn't about created reality, it's about reality, which we will show. Ogedad, who softened his approach because he thought he had COVID and now realises he doesn't, said bingo. In his tiny bubble of a mind, he's never heard of breakthrough infections. Never heard of long COVID, never heard of many things. It's sad. It's even sadder that a reasonably smart, intelligent adult actually agrees with that absolute nonsense statement. But again, whatever agrees with what they believe in is right, and everything else is socialism, New World Order, evil, and they use transference to put it onto their position. They use what they're doing wrong to label me. I made the comment, and like I said, I'm just sitting back and watching them respond to my opinion where I disagree with the video, where I do honestly think that you cannot claim being unvaccinated is a patriotic act. I really don't see how it can be. It makes none of the definitions of patriotism for me, but whatever. He wanted to put that opinion out there and encourage people not to get vaccinated in an airborne pandemic. Good luck. Now, Manifestation of Imagination is one of the weirdest people I've ever come across. He actually has threatened to dox me on more than one occasion and has used private information from an email exchange openly online to try and control me and shut me up. None of these people believe in free speech at all. They believe in speech that backs up their own worldview. They believe everybody else should be silenced. What does Manifestation of Imagination have to actually say of any relevance to this topic? I'm not hiding in fear. But I also am not using Nuremberg and the rest of it. It's amazing. These people who wouldn't lift a finger to protect Jewish people in 1930 if they lived in Germany. These people wouldn't lift a finger to stop euthanization of disabled people in Germany. They wouldn't. What's Imagination of Manifestation done for black rights in the last 20 years? What's he done for women's rights in the last 20 years? I don't know, maybe he's done a whole ton of things. But it's very easy to look at somebody and say, you are completely wrong. No, your opinion is I'm completely wrong. And then you give unsubstantiated, unsighted evidence that's got nothing to do with the topic. It's simple. If you're vaccinated, you're less likely to catch COVID. If you don't have COVID, it's impossible to pass it along to children and other people. If you don't pass it along, there's much less chance of having outbreaks and there's much less chance of hospitals being overwhelmed and lockdowns happening, which is good for America and every other country in the world. If you're not vaccinated, it is much more likely that you will catch COVID-19 and that you will pass it along, and you or your family or people you've met will end up in hospital and hospitals will shut down and we'll have lockdowns. You can define either one of those as patriotism. Neither is patriotic, but taking a risk for your country is. And if you genuinely think without any evidence that vaccines are unsafe, take it. Be brave. Don't hide from it. Do the good thing for your country. And I don't know what's wrong with that opinion. I can see why they don't agree. But boy, don't they go loony quick. I appreciate this. Tell me to stay safe. I think that's good. I hope everybody out there stays safe. I don't wish ill or evil or death on anybody. But is there any evidence at all that what he's saying isn't complete and absolute nonsense, gibberish and rubbish? And dangerous and unpatriotic, because it's going to encourage people not to be vaccinated, which is going to make lockdowns and deaths more likely in America. This is Ontario the other day. As you can quite easily and quite clearly and quite comprehendingly see, the difference between vaccinated and unvaccinated is pretty straightforward. There isn't really an argument here. They keep making one, but there isn't an argument other than to say lies. Yes, breakdown infections occur, but for most people who are fully vaccinated after a period of weeks, the effects of COVID-19 are minimal compared to the unvaccinated. But that seems to be escaping these people. Of course, their trainers decided to lump in, and he decided to say absolute garbage as well. No way the minority of unvaccinated will be tolerated as nonsense. That is an interesting, if not telling, comment. No, Steve, it's the truth.
Many of us are frustrated with the nearly 80 million Americans who are still not vaccinated, even though the vaccine is safe, effective, and free. While the vaccines provide strong protection for the vaccinated, we read about and hear about and we see the stories of hospitalized people on their deathbeds, among the unvaccinated over the past few weeks. This is a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
Your own president is getting fed up. But what about everybody else? What about the 80% of people who yet again are looking forward to lockdown because yet again the hospitals, as I've shown, are completely full of the unvaccinated? How do they feel?
Who are you listening to? Those idiots across the road? Those anti-vaxxers? Is that who is dictating what you do?
And I'm fighting for mankind. I'm fighting for mankind. Yeah, you get your death jabs, you get your booster shots. You're sheep. You're sheep.
You're the minority, and you are wrong. Okay, Dad, if I came round to your house, I certainly wouldn't enter it because you're unvaccinated and your whole family's sick, as we will talk about. But one of the issues I have here is this whole concept that they believe violent armed response defends freedom. So you shut down. If I come and knock on your door, Ogedad, and I try and explain why I believe you should be vaccinated, I see an inherent threat there. Your position is that weak. You got to admit, my little innocent opinion comment on the video really gave these somewhat overweight bearded people something to really get excited about. They're fighting for my freedom, I guess. I don't think they are, but whatever. But this is a really fascinating comment. Remember, this dude has already told me that I know literally nothing. If someone wants to get the jab, they can go ahead and get it. Of course they can. Why wouldn't you? Just wear an N95 around me. Excuse me? If someone doesn't want to get it, more power to them. Just wear an N95 around me. Face coverings don't cut it. They only stop. Again, he starts quoting stuff that's not true. Well, N95 stops 95%. Again, you don't understand how an N95 works, but whatever. I'm taking all my vitamins and minerals to keep my immune system strong. I'm in my 60s. You're a complete fool. Look, while I take his point, and I definitely wear an N95, I strongly suspect he isn't. I strongly suspect that he is not, because most of these anti-vaxxers are also anti-maskers, are also anti-shutting schools, and are also anti-lockdown. They're anti-anything that actually works. But, you know, whatever. But let's look at the facts, eh? 7 times more likely to get COVID-19. 50 times more likely to go to hospital. 30 times more likely to die. This isn't even close. This isn't even something to do a video on. Doing a video about why you shouldn't get vaccinated when you are 30 times more likely to die if you catch COVID-19 unvaccinated as opposed to vaccinated. Oh my God. A face mask interferes with personal freedom. Holy gosh. I don't see you guys walking around Costco's naked now, do I? It's a simple, easy thing to do for a temporary period of time where we have an airborne pandemic to prevent people who are infected breathing out the virus into the airways of people around them. This has got nothing to do with personal freedom and everything to do with healthcare. You can see here's some data from King County. Not that you need it, but to be unvaccinated in September of 2021 is a completely stupid thing to do. And a lot of intelligent people have brainwashed themselves and are getting information feeds from videos like Anthony's that backs up their stupid and dangerous point of view. And I made a little comment, and at this point I did reply. And my reply, of course, I'm a content expert. I am a content expert in this, and none of these gentlemen, and certainly Anthony, is not a content expert in pandemics or risk management or healthcare to the degree that I am. They're not. They really are not. And I'm kind of fed up of it. I'm fed up of people spouting rubbish. It's okay to have an opinion. It's okay to have an opinion that's based on somewhat reality, but to claim that being vaccinated is unpatriotic, because if you claim being unvaccinated is patriotism, then you're claiming the opposite as well. Can't have it both ways, Anthony, and you're dead wrong. 70-80% of the population who are vaccinated are absolutely fed up of this. We're fed up of the clear evidence that vaccines work. We're fed up of the clear evidence that masks work. We're fed up of you lot rambling on about trying to save mankind and patriotism and freedom when it has got nothing to do with that. It's your freedom to drive drunk. It's your freedom not to wear a safety belt. It's your freedom not to have insurance on your car. It's your freedom to drive whichever way you want to on a highway. You don't do that because it's dangerous and it's stupid to do so, and you can harm yourself and others. And it's the same thing, except you guys made a decision back in January to March that it wasn't. that it was actually the New World Order and it's all faked, and you're still pushing that line, and you think taking some multivitamins are going to protect you as a fat, bearded 60-year-old guy if you catch COVID, unfortunately, you're wrong. You've got a 3% chance if you catch that of dying, at least. And I despair. I really despair. 3% is 1 in 33 times. 1 in 33 people that catch it die in your age group, in your weight. I don't know. It really is bizarre. Again, clearly not understanding science, clearly not understanding vaccines, clearly not understanding the pandemic plans that were in place before COVID started. Again, Anthony, don't talk about stuff that you don't understand. Don't trivialize my experience. It's way more than you know. And I'll tell you right now, most doctors are not as content expert in pandemics and planning for them and dealing with them as I am. This is the 3rd pandemic I've worked through. I know what I'm talking about. And I'm afraid my opinion is different from yours. Deal with it. There's no need to get nasty. There's no need to try and trivialize my abilities. There's none of that is required. It's just not required. But yet, it's the only argument you have, isn't it? And there he goes. Oh, Dad. I'm full of it. Right, I am. I'm full of it. I'm completely insane. All of the medical people, all of the nurses, most of them throughout the world, most of the world's governments, they're all crazy. They're all full of it. Ogre Dad knows what he's talking about because he's surrounded by medical people. Yes, I'm not an expert. Ogre Dad is the judge of expertise, I guess. He then brags about how the fact his entire family's sick. I mean, he's doing something wrong with health, isn't he? Or maybe he's just got faulty genes. I think something's going on. I strongly suspect he's not a vegan. One of the things I find really interesting is how they personalise the issue. And of course I personalised it back in this video because frankly I'm sick of them and they need to take a hike off my channel. The information I have is very good. It's very high quality in terms of health. The information they have on their channels is political talking head nonsense. And I don't think it preps you. I don't think it helps anybody. I think all it does is cause chaos and anger and upset. It's a simple issue. As Sheriff Judd said, this is not a political issue. It really isn't. And by trying to make it patriotism, wow, you are just losing the plot. So the government's not going house to house. You don't have to be vaccinated for some jobs. You have to be vaccinated for other jobs. If you have to be vaccinated for the other jobs and you choose not to be, you have to provide regular testing to prove you haven't got COVID. That's the threat. But these guys have to have the government coming door to door. They have to tell me to shut up. They have to threaten me with violence because they don't have anything else in their lives. They don't have the intellect to cope with this pandemic. They haven't got the skills or the tools to mentally cope with a pandemic of long duration that is thankfully not as killing as it could be. These people in a real pandemic of high mortality, wow, they are dangerous. They are dangerous people. And their arrogance and their aggression and their violence are not things that I wish to be associated with, both online and in my real life. I hope they get help. They're not prepping and they're not helping America. They're not being patriotic. They're really not. This type of vicious, nasty, childlike argument is not helpful. And as I said, and as the President said, 70% of Americans, about 80% of Canadians are fed up with it. We're sick of it. And people want vaccine passports. They want the unvaccinated out of their environment in the public sphere. And as I've said before, that's going to cause a reduction in my freedoms. Thank you, unvaccinated, for trampling all over my freedoms for, I don't know why you're doing this. I don't. It's just stupid. It's just really, really stupid. The evidence is crystal clear from around the world that unvaccinated people are far more likely to catch COVID-19, far more likely to go to hospital, and far more likely to die. That is the conditions we need for the governments to have to do another lockdown. Wow. And that's what you're fighting for? Please stop fighting for me. I don't need this anymore. It's been a long pandemic and I've worked very hard during it. I suspect, Ogre Dad, you've done nothing at all to make things better in your community. Nothing. And I wish him and his poor family luck because his approach to this is really dangerous for them. And I hope it doesn't backfire on him. I really do. I hope it doesn't backfire on America, this constant minority that keeps screaming about freedom because they want people like me silenced. I'm really sick of it. And I gave them my opinion, and I reiterate this, that my opinion is my opinion. I'm entitled to my opinion. I'm not out there to stir the pot. My initial comment was just straightforward. I don't agree with you, Anthony. I don't think patriotism means that you take risks of catching an infection when you don't need to, and you take risks of being hospitalized when you don't need to, and you take risks of dying when you don't need to. And it's certainly definitely not patriotic to then make that choice knowing that it's going to harm and affect other people. I'm not so easily dismissive here of children and adults and the elderly who catch it and die from it. It's not their fault. And it's not something we can blame. It isn't that everybody that catches it has diabetes. The majority of people with COVID-19 have diabetes about the same. The death rate is higher with diabetes, but the death rate from cardiac arrest is higher if you have diabetes. So you know what? Oh, good dad, go vegan. It'll be good for you. And actually try and be more socialist in your approach. Don't just prep and think about yourself from a selfish point of view. It actually has scientifically been studied and shown that it's actually a really bad move in terms of longevity and quality of life. Well, that's it from me. The issue here for me is that, simply put, people cannot commando and take over national health emergency and global health emergencies and politicize it and call it patriotic or not patriotic. It isn't patriotic to be vaccinated, it's sensible. It's not patriotic to be unvaccinated, it's not sensible. The data doesn't back it up. It's not like you have a choice to make here. You really don't. But they've convinced themselves that they have a choice. They have convinced themselves that they're acting to protect America. It's flabbergasting, absolutely flabbergasting to me. And I did feel I had to respond. They probably deleted the comment, they probably banned me from the channel, whatever. You can go in the description and watch the whole argument if you like. And I will warn you that these arguments are very pervasive. They say absolute rubbish in comments and on videos. Rubbish. Like, everybody who gets vaccinated is sicker than people who aren't. You know, thinking that people who are vaccinated are shedding the virus, so they have to wear an N95. Wow, and you're calling me somebody who doesn't know what I'm talking about. Consider these people, consider their channels, consider where you're getting your prepping advice from. Are they doing it for clicks, for AdSense, for drama, for political reasons? Are they paid agents who are actually doing this to destabilize the United States? You have to wonder. Most of those comments that I went through actually are harming America. If they're listened to and understood, even on an unconscious level, they harm their nation. They don't help it. Toodles. This has been a Wolfie Terry production 2021.